At the funeral, they didn't let her say goodbye. The casket was sealed, a military casualty, but then a Roma woman whispered something to her, and everything took a different turn. But before we begin our story, let's do a quick roll call. Let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to read your comments. Enjoy the story. The heat that day felt like the sky itself had decided to boil the last breath of life out of the streets. The air shimmered above the asphalt. Trees swayed lazily as if they themselves didn't quite believe in motion. People searched for shade, any sliver of relief. But in Vera Sanders' mind, only one thought thundered. Why was I called? Why so urgently? At the doors of the military recruitment office, she was met by a man with a face of stone. A colonel, someone she had barely exchanged a few polite words with at official events in the past. Now he looked at her like he was about to shatter her world, but delicately. My condolences. Your son, Matthew, was killed in action. His unit came under artillery fire. The tank crew was completely wiped out. All 3 men died. He spoke dryly, avoiding her eyes. Mechanically, he handed her a sealed envelope with the official notification. Black on white, the unthinkable. Her son was dead. Vera didn't scream, didn't collapse. She just stood there like a statue, as if someone had yanked the plug and cut off all her emotions. Her mouth went dry. Cold spread inside her, out of place in the summer heat. They'll bring him back tomorrow. Zinc casket, military honors, the day after tomorrow. Sealed, no face, no hands, not even the shape of a body, just metal and a nameplate. She didn't remember walking out, didn't remember how she got home, how she sat down in the armchair where she and Matthew used to drink tea and chat about nothing. Now the tea was cooling on the table, her hands too weak to pick up the cup. Only one thought echoed. It's not him. It can't be him. The next day she stood by the casket. The funeral homeroom was stifling, not just from the heat, but from the tension and the cold indifference of strangers. 2 sergeants murmured quietly at the door, never taking their eyes off her, as if she were a threat. But she was his mother, the one who raised him, the one who let him go. She approached as close as she could. No tears. She'd burned out earlier, but her hands trembled. The sealed casket gleamed dully under the fluorescent light. A small metal plaque bore his name. "Open it," she said softly. "I need to see. He's my son." "You can't," the colonel answered sharply. He was there again. "There was a fire. The body. It's not advisable. You understand that?" "No, you don't understand. I'm his mother. If you won't let me say goodbye, I'll open it myself." She reached toward the lid, but they stopped her. The sergeants held her back, firmly but gently, as if she wasn't a grieving mother, just another hysteric. She screamed, called his name, begged them to let her see who they were burying. But the casket stood unmoved in the corner, mute, foreign, sealed forever. After the funeral, Vera wandered home, not seeing the streets. The world had dissolved. All that remained was silence and heat that soaked to the bone. As she passed a bench near a local store, she didn't even notice the old woman approach. She looked like she came from another century, headscarf pulled down to her brows, toothless, whispering, "Pretty lady, wait. Cross my palm with silver and I'll tell you where he is." Vera instinctively turned to walk away. She wanted to disappear. But the woman's voice was strangely sure. "He's not on the other side. That casket isn't yours." Vera froze. For the first time in 2 days, truly froze. She looked at the woman like she was insane, and at the same time, like a lifeline. "What did you say?" "It's not him. His soul is alive, but the road will be long and dirty." Vera's hand clenched the strap of her purse. Her legs buckled. She said nothing, just kept walking. But the old woman's words continued to burn inside her like a whisper that never quiets. At home, she opened an old box. Inside were childhood drawings, prom photos, a movie ticket from the first film they saw together. Everything felt like yesterday, and it felt like Matthew would walk through the door any minute, wiping sweat from his neck and muttering, "Mom, you bought this milk again." But he didn't come in. And yet, something in her chest flickered, Something unexplainable, not faith, not hope, something deeper. What if it wasn't him? What if he's out there, where no one is looking? A week passed after the funeral. The sun still burned without mercy, but Vera barely noticed the heat or the people around her. Her inner thermometer was frozen somewhere between despair and flat-out denial. She didn't cry, not because she had no tears left, but because her body had seemingly revoked its own right to mourn without proof. She spent more and more time in silence, surrounded by Matthew's belongings. His old laptop, a button-up shirt still draped on the back of a chair from the day he left. Even his favorite chipped coffee mug, everything untouched. He was too meticulous to just disappear like that. Matthew wasn't the kind of person who vanished without leaving a trace. Her hands shook as she opened his messaging apps. The last messages were simple, routine. Mom, everything's fine. Weather's okay. Food's tolerable. She reread them endlessly, as if hidden between the lines was a cry for help, a code, a sign. Then came the photos. Him in uniform, with friends, in front of military equipment, smiling. But the smile was tired, mature, not the one she remembered. She paused at one photo, where he stood slightly apart from the others, like he never fully belonged. Her heart clenched. He always stood a little to the side, too serious, too genuine. She remembered the day he left. They stood together at the bus station, Matthew calm, no dramatic speeches about duty or sacrifice. He just said, "Mom, it'll be okay. I'll come back. Promise." Then he hugged her, not like a farewell, but like a vow. She believed in him then, believed in his strength, her love, and in justice. Now, those memories stabbed like broken glass under her skin. She knew. Her son couldn't have died like that. Not him. She called his base, wrote letters, returned to the recruitment office. The answer was always the same. The tank burned. No one survived. The fire was so intense that only fragments of bodies were found. DNA could not be confirmed. Everything collected was buried together. One of the 3 caskets was labeled as Matthew's, based on items found nearby. "Accept the reality, Mrs. Sanders," the colonel said, weary. "No one survives a direct hit in a burning tank. This isn't a movie." But she couldn't accept it. Something deep inside her fought back. One day, after another round of futile office visits, she came home and sat at her computer. She opened Telegram. She'd heard about underground groups that shared photos of POWs, battle sites, messages from volunteers. The info was often unofficial, sometimes contradictory, but that's exactly what drew her in. For hours she scrolled through posts, scanned faces, read lists, desperately looking for a familiar detail. Her eyes burned, but her fingers kept scrolling. Then a name caught her eye. The last name wasn't exact, but close. Below it, a photo, blurry, grainy, but the facial features, nearly his. Vera gasped, yanked the power cord from the wall, then immediately printed the photo. She placed it under a lamp, studied it, forehead, cheekbones. That gaze, so familiar. She knew how easy it was in grief to see your loved one in any stranger's face, but this felt different. She didn't just hope, she knew. She didn't sleep that night, hammered at the keyboard, digging for more evidence, cross-referencing dates. A user in the comments mentioned that the young man in the photo had an accent, somewhere from the Midwest. Another claimed he'd been injured but could walk. The next day, she went to see someone a neighbor had recommended, a woman with special abilities. Vera had never believed in psychics or mysticism, but now even the faintest whisper of a lead was something to chase. The apartment was on the first floor of an old duplex. The windows were covered in thick drapes, keeping out all light. Inside smelled of dried herbs and smoke, like someone had recently burned sage. Shelves held jars, old books, pinned photographs. The woman who answered was older, with a straight back and piercing eyes. No theatrics, no chanting, just a quiet, steady presence. "You have a photo?" she asked simply. Vera silently handed her both pictures, Matthew's official portrait and the blurry one. The woman spread them on the table, turned on a desk lamp, and stared in silence for several minutes. "There's a connection," she finally said. "Not physical, spiritual. The energy is the same." "That's not proof," Vera replied. "A number. But it's not coincidence either." "You're saying that's him?" "I make no promises," the woman said calmly. "But if he were gone, I'd feel it. That's not what I sense. Someone's holding on to life, fiercely, with teeth, hands, and memory." Vera swallowed, trying not to tremble. "Where is he?" "I don't know. But I know this. He's not alone. And he's waiting to be found." Vera left in a daze. The meeting didn't give her coordinates, but it realigned her internal compass. Everything changed after that. She wasn't grieving anymore. She was searching. She created a spreadsheet of names, tracked prisoner exchanges, studied videos, read comments, compared silhouettes, posture, gestures, and each day she became more certain he wasn't dead. She couldn't explain it to anyone but herself. And deep down, she could already hear his voice. Faint, but alive. "Mom, just a little longer. I'm coming." The fragile spark of hope in Vera's eyes was fresh, almost innocent. But the story that would eventually lead her to the truth had started long before, months earlier, on the very day Matthew, unaware of his fate, stepped away from the tank for just a few minutes. Matthew barely opened his eyes. Everything around him floated in a grayish-green haze. Above him, trees, a forest, damp earth beneath his back. "Where am I? What happened?" He tried to move, and his body responded with a dull pain in his side and neck. His head felt trapped in a steel vise, blood in his mouth. At first he thought it was a dream, then that he was dead. But death, as he had imagined it, wasn't supposed to be this sticky, this painful. Memory came back like a whip across the spine. The tank's interior, the engine hum, then the radio going silent. He had argued with the technician just 2 days earlier, demanding the comms be fixed. Their crew had requested a new comms unit, but the command brushed it off. "It works fine. Stop whining." That morning, the radio was acting up again. As crew commander, Matthew decided to check the antenna manually, something he'd done before. It would take 10 minutes. He climbed off the tank, moved a little into the brush to stay low. That's when he heard the whistle, that sharp, unmistakable whistle. A second later, fire erupted across the sky. The tank took a direct hit. He saw the turret fly off, flames pouring out. The blast knocked him backward. Everything went black. When he came to, he had no idea how much time had passed. An hour, a day, night. His strength was almost gone. He tried to sit up, and that's when figures emerged from the trees. Soldiers, but not his. One of them hit him in the gut with the butt of a rifle. He collapsed, gasping. Then a second blow, this time to the head. He didn't remember how he ended up in the basement. It was dark. Mold clung to the walls. The air reeked of urine and rot. His body ached. A rib felt cracked. His wrists were zip-tied, later replaced with rope. They threw him on the concrete floor and left. Then came the questioning. Short, rough. They took everything. His ID, his watch, a small cross necklace. One of the guards, young with crooked teeth, grinned. "What? Didn't think we'd catch a hero," he sneered. "Relax. You're nobody now." Then the days started. Long, sticky days. Same crust of bread. Same dented tin cup of water. Morning only differed from night by the silence and the occasional groans from other cells. Sometimes someone cried. Sometimes someone prayed. A guy across from him kept whispering, "My mom's coming. My mom's coming." Until one day he didn't say anything at all. Matthew held on. He didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't break. In his mind, he wrote a diary. He recalled everything he could to stay sane. His mom teaching him to tie his shoes. His first kiss at age 10 behind the apartment complex. The fight that followed over a candy bar. The way his mother's hands smelled when she stroked his hair at night. He counted days by crumbs, by footsteps, by the sound of guards changing shifts. One day they dragged him into a hallway. There was a man with a camera. Orders were shouted. Hands gripped his shoulders. Flash in the face. "Standard record," said the same grinning guard. Click. One photo, one moment. That image would eventually make its way online and reignite his mother's belief. Back in his cell, he collapsed. The dreams were broken and flickering, like static from a busted TV. In the dreams, he walked a street while his mother waved to him, called his name, but he couldn't reach her. He didn't know where he was, didn't know if his friends were alive, or if anyone even remembered him. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You have to survive. For her. For yourself." Meanwhile, in her apartment across the country, Vera clutched that photo. It was grainy, like a clipping from an old newspaper, the face half in shadow. But the eyes, she'd recognize those eyes out of a million. She brought that photo everywhere. The military office, the police station, even the local news. Everywhere she got the same reaction. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we have no evidence. It's probably fake, some online hoax. Maybe you're just not ready to let go." Someone even told her, "You're grieving, ma'am, it happens. Sometimes the mind plays tricks." She left those buildings defeated, but not broken. She printed the photo in every size, ran comparisons. She started a blog to share her side of the story. But most importantly, she was planning a trip. She still had savings. Her friends thought she was losing it, but she didn't care. Even if the chances were 1 in a million, she had to go. If he was alive, she'd find him. If he was dead, she wanted the truth. But she couldn't live unless she saw it with her own eyes. Every night, Matthew whispered his mother's name before falling asleep. Vera. As if somehow he knew. She was already on her way. The train departed at night, heading toward the capital. Vera sat by the window in the soft glow of the cabin lights, gripping a thick plastic folder filled with photographs and printed messages from Telegram. She wore simple jeans, an old jacket, and a worn-out backpack, the same one she once packed Matthew's school lunches in. She didn't have a plan. No connections, no influence, no official status. All she had was stubbornness, maternal instinct, and a photo, blurry, dark, barely legible, but unmistakably alive. The first stop was the Department of Veterans Affairs, the federal building where slogans like "No one left behind" echoed through sterile lobbies that smelled of coffee and paper. She waited her turn, standing among weary families and bureaucrats. At the window, a young officer with a polished badge and an expressionless face listened as she laid out her case. "You're here to inquire about your son?" he asked, tired. "Ma'am, we have a death certificate. The body was returned. He was buried with honors. I understand this is difficult, but what's the issue?" She didn't raise her voice. She simply unfolded the photo and laid it out next to the official documents. "If he's dead, then who is this?" she asked, her voice flat. The officer didn't even glance down. "There's a lot of misinformation online. Images get manipulated all the time. I can't help you with internet rumors. Please don't disturb the process." And just like that, she was dismissed. Next. Outside, she didn't feel her feet. Her heart wasn't beating in grief. It pulsed with rage. It wasn't fate she was fighting anymore. It was a system that made room for paperwork, not for miracles. Days blurred into one another. She went from one agency to another, veterans committees, prisoner exchange coordination centers. She met people who treated her like a crazy person. Others suggested therapy. One even gave her the number of a volunteer, though it felt more like a way to get rid of her. And then, in a small, nearly hidden office with a faded sign that read "Missing Service Member Initiative," something changed. A man, unkempt beard, bruised eye, military t-shirt, looked her in the eye. For the first time, someone really looked at her. "My name's Tyler," he said, his voice carrying both fatigue and something else, respect. "You're not the first mother to come in here with a photo like this. And you know what? Some of them were right." Vera stared at him, as if trying to decide if she could trust him with the tiny universe of hope she carried. "I'm not looking for sympathy," she said, "or attention. I just want to know. Is he alive?" Tyler was quiet. Then he glanced at her printouts, typed something on his laptop and said, "I can't promise anything. But if you're not afraid, let's go." They traveled to a center where returning POWs were registered after exchanges. The journey took hours, buses, transfers, paperwork, checkpoints. On the way, Vera told him about Matthew, about how he helped her buy a new kettle with his first paycheck, how he chose his college without pressure, how once, long before he enlisted, he told her, "Mom, I'll never be a burden on you. Even if war comes, I'll go. But only if it's my decision." Tyler nodded silently. "Guys like him? They're the ones who make it back," he said quietly. At that very moment, across the country, a silent exchange was taking place. Buses, injured, exhausted men who hadn't yet processed what freedom even meant. Matthew was the last to step off. Thin, shaved head, a bruise beneath his eye. There was something burning behind his eyes, something quiet and dangerous. Medics whispered, "He's in better shape than the others." But Matthew didn't believe it. Not that he was free, not that anyone was waiting for him. In the hospital, he stayed silent, didn't ask to make a call, didn't tell them his address. He thought, if Mom thinks I'm gone, maybe it's better. No false hope. What he didn't know was that she was already traveling the same tracks he had once taken to deployment. When they arrived at the intake office, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a permanent frown went through the day's list. "There was an exchange today," she said, flipping through forms. "Hold on." Vera held her breath. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned out the rest of the room. The woman cross-checked names, paused, looked again, pulled another list. "He's on the list of recovered personnel," she said. "Came in last night, still registered under a temporary ID. We haven't identified all of them yet." Vera gripped the edge of the table. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Regional hospital, rooms under quarantine, but..." The woman didn't finish her sentence. Vera was already heading for the exit. Hope didn't just come back to life. It roared, like an old engine fed one last spark. He sat on the hospital bed like a man on the edge of the world, legs stretched out, a wrap around his ankle, the same bruise under his eye. Weak sunlight filtered through the window, and in that light, she stood, Vera. Matthew didn't believe it at first, thought it was a hallucination. They stared at each other, two people who had survived the storm, each in their own way, one in flames, the other in silence. She didn't cry, didn't rush to hug him. She walked up slowly and touched his face, warm, real. Mom. It was the first time he had said that word in so long. "You really thought I'd believe you were gone?" she asked softly. "Everyone acted like you should be dead, and like I should just accept it." He pulled her close. No tears. She held him the way she did when he was a little boy, gently, as if afraid he might break, and at the same time rebuilding him piece by piece. 2 weeks passed. Matthew was living with her again. Their kitchen was once more filled with the smell of coffee in the mornings and quiet evenings shared over mugs of tea. But something had changed, something fragile, like a glass cup that had once shattered and been carefully glued back together. He didn't tell her everything. She didn't ask. Hints, glances, silences were enough. But there were things that couldn't wait. Matthew needed real recovery, therapy, physical rehab, long-term care. All of it cost money. Vera's savings dwindled quickly, so they went to seek assistance. After all, he had returned. He had made it through hell. He wasn't asking for medals, just help. At the military records office, a new official met them, not the one who had once lied straight to Vera's face. This man was younger, glasses, clean-cut, clipped tone. "Yes, the name appears in the repatriation records," he said, "but the situation is complicated." "What does that mean?" Vera's voice was tense, her hand gripping her purse strap. "Well, according to the report, the tank was destroyed in combat. All were presumed dead. Your son wasn't present at the time of the attack. Technically, he left his post. We can't rule out desertion." Matthew was silent, as if all of this had already happened in his mind. "So I'm a deserter now?" he asked flatly. "I didn't say that," the man replied quickly, but officially, without an investigation, we can't classify you as a combat veteran, which means no benefits, no support, not until this is resolved." "And you're not planning to investigate, are you?" Vera asked, meeting his eyes. The man shrugged. "We're overwhelmed as it is. Look at it this way. You made it home. That's more than most." They walked out without another word. On the sidewalk, Matthew cursed under his breath, not loudly, not wildly, just controlled rage. Vera reached out and took his hand. "It's okay. We'll fight this too, together this time." Months passed. Matthew slowly began to recover. His body bounced back faster than expected. His mind far slower. Some nights, he sat alone in the kitchen, staring into space. Some afternoons, he'd go out and not say where he'd been, but he lived. That was enough for now. Eventually, he started helping others, men who had also returned. He wrote under a pseudonym, contributed to forums, answered emails from desperate families searching for their sons. He became the voice in the Telegram groups his mother once scoured for signs of him. Vera went back to tending her flowers, baking pies, reading books before bed, now for herself. The house was quiet again, and warm. One evening they sat on the bench outside their apartment. Fall had just begun. The air was crisp, the sky impossibly deep and blue. Vera looked at him and said, "Sometimes I feel like you really did die back then, and came back as someone new." Matthew gave a small smile, half sad, half real. "I think so too. But now I have you, and I'm never going back. Not ever. I won't let go." He squeezed her hand, warm, solid. The night crept down the rooftop slowly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Vera believed, the world hadn't been fixed. The system was still broken, indifferent, but they had a home, they had each other, and that was enough to start over. Dear listeners, thank you for staying with us until the very end. This story was heavy, but thankfully, it didn't end in darkness. We're glad things turned out better than they could have. If this story touched you, please consider giving it a like. It means the world to us. Subscribe if you haven't already. We have more true stories ahead. Today, Vera and Matthew are doing well. He met someone. They fought for justice through noise, through media, through volunteers. They earned their status back, earned the right to live again. And still, sometimes in the silence of the night, Matthew asks himself, what's the point of it all? When you volunteer knowing you might not return, and when you do come back alive, you have to prove you're not the enemy. You have to grovel for help. And he hasn't found the answers yet, not all of them, but he's alive, and maybe, just maybe, that's what matters most.